Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Sue, and all at the Clean Sport Alliance for giving me the opportunity to come here and speak to you today. As it's a recorded presentation, I don't know if I've just been given a huge introduction, but just in case, my name is Rebecca Lee, and I've worked at the UEFA Anti-Doping Unit for the last 6.5 years. I believe we have been described in the programme as a world-leading anti-doping organisation, which is very kind. But I would say that we're not a world-leading anti-doping organisation yet in terms of education. And the reason I say this is not to downplay what we do. We have a fantastic programme at UEFA, but it's more to explain why the ISE, the International Standard for Education, has been really useful to me. It's sort of given a focus to what we're going to develop for our education programme. In my short presentation today, I'm going to attempt to bring the ISE to life in terms of the UEFA anti-doping programme. So just over 12 months ago, I started with a blank sheet of paper and the International Standard for Education and kind of worked outwards from there. And the first thing to establish was what we should be aiming for. We want to get away from the catching the cheaters message and really want to move towards supporting the clean players in their desire for a level playing field. We want to prevent intentional and unintentional doping, and we also want to use UEFA's position within sport to promote positive attitudes towards clean sport. And the vision and the goal is that a player's first experience with anti-doping should be through education rather than a test. I guess none of these goals will be surprising to anybody, but it's also always useful to state where you want to get to before you launch into a plan. The next step of the ISE is a system assessment, the identification of potential target groups for the education. And if we look at UEFA, we are the Union of European Football Associations. We are a continental confederation with responsibility for football in Europe. And we have a vast potential target group for our education. We have approximately 15,000 players who take part in UEFA competitions each season. And that doesn't even include the coaches, doctors, agents, parents, sponsors that go along with these players. So the target group is potentially vast. We also have a high turnover of players. If you look at even just our two top level men's competitions, the Champions League and Europa League, over 60% of the players that are taking part in this year's competition didn't take part last year. So we do have a very high turnover of players. The next step in the ISE is to analyse your current education activities. So if we looked at UEFA's, we deliver education sessions in UEFA's youth final tournaments. So we educate over 1,100 players and their team doctors and support staff. We also have an anti-doping guide for players, a dedicated anti-doping section on UEFA.com. We are part of the UEFA Players app, and you can see an image from that in the middle icon there. This is designed to expand the knowledge of football players on football and career management through use of interactive learning, but it also obviously contains a section on anti-doping. We also have the UEFA Football Doctor Education Programme. In elite football, everything to do with anti-doping is delegated by the player to their team doctor, which means that they are a crucial target group for us in terms of education. Which is why the Football Doctor Education Programme for us is really important. We also have the UEFA A, B and Pro licenses for coaches, which contain sections on ethics and the rules and procedures and consequences of doping. I think the main learning I got from the system assessment of our current education activities was that we were actually doing quite a lot, but it just didn't really have much structure to it, which is why it was useful to do this assessment in the context of the ISE. The next step of the assessment is regarding resources. Who and what do you have that can help you deliver your education programme? At UEFA, we have quite a small team. There are 6 members of our unit, and education is maybe 1/5 of my job responsibilities and maybe 1/10 of my colleague Thomas's. So human resources aren't huge. We are obviously very lucky in football and at UEFA that we do have quite significant financial resources, and I don't say that lightly. I recognise how lucky we are there. We also have 55 member associations, some excellent European NARDOs and also a huge amount of WADA resources. Whatever we put in place somehow needs to make use of this network and support it as well. Once you've done a system assessment, the next step is to identify your education pool. As mentioned, we have a huge potential target group for education, but we have to be realistic about what's achievable. We only have the jurisdiction to test players within our competitions, so our primary responsibility should be to educate the players that qualify for these events. The other people that we can have a direct influence on are the coaches and team doctors of these elite players. Given that they have a mandatory responsibility to support athletes with anti-doping, they absolutely need to be included in our plan. But even if I wanted to, I couldn't physically educate all of these people. So the conclusion that I came to after system analysis was that the best thing I can do as a continental confederation is to set the tone at the top, get accurate and relevant information out there, produce resources that work for my sport, and also support the network. So now we come to the plan. How do we use the ISE to improve and develop what we already have? When the ISE sets out the roles and responsibilities for NARDOs and international federations, the NARDO is king in terms of clean sport education in their own countries. And the IF has a responsibility to require their national federations to conduct education in collaboration with the NARDOs. And I would say, fortunately, at UEFA, by the time the ISE was released, we had already negotiated internally to have funding allocated annually to our national federations for anti-doping. And we simply used the ISE to kind of fine-tune the requirements. To get the funding, the national federations have to write and send us an education plan that they prepared in collaboration with their NARDO. We know that a lot of NARDOs and national federations already have an excellent working relationship. And if so, the funding that we're introducing kind of simply just supports that work. And if they don't already have that relationship, we hope that this project really will help to develop the network. To launch the project, we had organised a huge workshop with 55 national federations and I think 46 NARDOs, which was due to be held in March of this year. Unfortunately, as with everything else in 2020, this was postponed due to coronavirus, but will make a digital reappearance early in the new year. Towards the end of next year, we're also going to support the national federations by organising educator training. This is again all about building and supporting the network. We're also developing resources, and this is where we recognise that we need help. In our team, we have anti-doping experts, but we don't have anybody who has a background in education. And as we are neither elite football players nor their support staff, we're also not people who are in the target group for our education. So we have appointed education experts Leeds Beckett to support with the development of the materials. And we also have an expert group of players and team doctors who can challenge the ideas and make sure that whatever we develop works on the ground. An international federation can obviously set also a clean sport message at the top. So with social media messaging, with branding, with getting top players involved. I have a meeting next week with our communications team at UEFA to really try and kickstart this project. We also have a responsibility to provide people within our education pool with access to relevant, accurate information on anti-doping. If somebody Googles football anti-doping, I want the UEFA website to come at the top. And we want that website to give them everything that they need to know. At this stage, we are not going to develop our own e-learning. We're planning to link our website to the WADA's e-learning, Adele. This may be the next step for us, but for now, this seems like the most practical solution. Finally, we come to monitoring and evaluation. And this is another area that I need expert support. We have engaged Leeds to conduct research into the knowledge of and attitudes towards anti-doping in elite European football. This will then be repeated in 4 or 5 years' time to see what impacts, if any, the programme that we've implemented has. We're also asking the national federations to provide an annual evaluation of their activities. Before they get the money the following year, they have to submit this to us. We're not at this stage making it a prerequisite that in order to take part in our competitions, you have to be educated, but this is definitely something that we could bring in if we see that it's necessary based on this monitoring. And I guess this is the point, really. We're at the stage of implementation, and the idea is that the strategy is a living document, and we will learn and we will develop as we go along. So to the conclusion, what have I learnt when developing this education programme? Use the ISE to provide focus. What we already have is good, but I needed the push of the ISE to bring it all together. Make use of the resources you have, and if you can't do it yourself, find someone to help. There is a huge network out there of educators and experts in this field, so make use of them. Consult people in your education pool. I am a non-football player from England, and I'm trying to develop resources for a 18-year-old from Kazakhstan. So we'd ask them what they need and not make assumptions about it. And my final point is be realistic about what you can achieve. Time will tell whether what I'm putting in place is realistic, but I am going to very much enjoy finding out. Thank you for your time today, and I look forward to answering any questions that you might have.